author Jean Oram here with the Cupcake Cottage. Today I am reading chapter 2. Thank you for joining me again. And if you somehow missed chapter 1, just go into the show notes here, the description there. Click on show more and I'll have a link to chapter 1 for you so you can dive in at the beginning and find out about Daisy-Mae and Maverick. And yes, Fish is here again today. There she is. She hears me talking and thinks I must be reading to her. Maybe it's read to your pet day somewhere. Anyway, let's dive into chapter 2 and see where Daisy-Mae and Maverick are. I still can't believe you didn't get fired for sass talking the publicity team. You must have someone helping you on the inside. Daisy-Mae turned to the deep voice, knowing without looking that it was Maverick, and that his words were directed at her, and that he was referencing the outburst she'd had at work almost 2 weeks ago. "Thanks for the vote of confidence," she said. He joined her at the white fence overlooking the pastures that ran into the Texas hills beyond the Wilders' backyard. Behind them and across the lawn, strings of lights lit up the stone patio at the back of the sprawling ranch house as dusk slowly settled in. The yard was filled with what seemed like half of Sweetheart Creek, here to celebrate Karen and Miles' engagement, her friend and her ex-boyfriend. She was happy for them both, but couldn't help wondering when Cupid was going to get around to finding someone for her too. Although these days Cupid would have to have pretty fast wings to catch up with her. Life had become a blur, and even more so since she stood up for Maverick in front of the PR team. Hey, it's not every day a small town bumpkin gives an NHL publicity team from New York what for and lives to tell about it. Maverick was all grins and as handsome as ever in his suit jacket, jeans, and cowboy hat. And cowboy boots. "Maybe I'm more than meets the eye." Daisy-Mae gave him a playful jab in the ribs while batting her eyelashes. Truthfully, she was still embarrassed by her outburst. The PR team had wanted to talk strategy about her wardrobe as Desi's handler. She'd been dressing like a puck bunny in a Dragons jersey tied at the waist, tight jeans, boots, and a Dragons cowboy hat at the home games, and they had decided they wanted a princess. As in a full-out princess to fulfill the dragon fairy tale theme, and they were going to spread that theme throughout the entire arena. Seriously, NHLers with a princess mascot? Were they trying to write the book on emasculation? As if the Dragons didn't already have enough stacked against them as the worst-ranked, newest team in the league. So, with little more than a thought beyond how embarrassing it would be for a man like Maverick, Daisy-Mae had opened her big mouth and told them exactly how she felt they should do their jobs. Then, once her brain had caught up with her, she excused herself, certain she was fired, and only a few weeks into her new job. "That's why I told Miranda to promote you to ticket holder experience manager," Maverick said. Wait, that was you? The promotion that had resulted from her rant had stunned her. But to know that Maverick had helped orchestrate it, that made her weak in the knees. Nobody had ever done something so incredibly sweet for her before, or thrown her so far out of her skill set. She literally had no credentials and was in charge of hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of merchandising and events for fans. She had ideas, sure. They were so obvious to her, like team-sponsored tailgate parties with lots of free swag before games. But everyone was grabbing at her ideas like they were pure gold. She was certain they'd soon discover she was just some high school graduate country bumpkin who didn't really belong there. "Anyone who shoots down a princess theme earns my loyalty," Maverick said. "Trust me." His look suggested that the PR team had tried to get him on board with the princess and dragon theme as well. "Didn't I earn your loyalty years ago?" Daisy-Mae gave him a sassy look, hands on her hips. "Nope. Not even that time I pretended to be your girlfriend so a gal would take a hint during World Juniors and stop throwing her bra at you whenever you left the ice." He laughed, shaking his head. "That was so embarrassing." "Funny though." He turned such an endearing shade of red each time, and here, almost 15 years later, he was still running around with that same color spectrum. He was running through that same color spectrum just talking about it. "Do you know how mad Miles got at me because I borrowed you like that? I don't think he expected you to hold my hand. At least I didn't sneak a kiss." His gaze traveled to her lips, and she leaned against the fence, trying to block out the image of what it might feel like to kiss this handsome man. Their eyes met, and they shared a smile at the memory of riling up Miles. It had been so easy sometimes. Thank you for... There were so many things on her list she didn't even know what to mention first, starting with the fact that Maverick could look past the stigma of her being a former beauty queen and might actually believe she had a few rocks rattling around in her head. But even bigger than that was that he'd stood up for her. He'd believed in and trusted her ability to do this new job, a big and important one. And that would undoubtedly reflect on him and the team in some pretty big ways. Yeah, he said bashfully. Don't worry about it. Us sweetheart creakers have to stick together. He gave her a friendly nudge, then leaned against the fence beside her, his back to the party. He was so close, his arm brushed hers. What would it feel like to be held by him? To place her arms around those broad shoulders and lean in, hear his heartbeat through his shirt and all that muscle. He idly held a bottle of beer in his hands, picking at its label. Daisy-Mae figured the drink was a prop to ward off drink offers, seeing as the hockey season had started 3 weeks ago. Well, I appreciate you vouching for me. A lot. Just keep me out of tutus and tiaras and we'll call it even. He gave her a smile that felt all-knowing, like they were friends, like they could keep each other's secrets and had inside jokes to laugh at, which they were, and they did. But they didn't hang out together without Miles, and now that Miles was getting married, she didn't foresee many moments like this with Maverick unless it was at a work function. She smiled and clinked her bottle against his. It's a deal. I'm still not sure what we'll do with you at the rink, though. Her heart dropped. What do you mean? You're an incredible distraction to the players. She laughed, his smile warming her belly. Maverick thought she was beautiful. Somehow that meant more than any of her beauty queen tiaras or crowns. He grimaced. What? It's true, we haven't won a single game this season. That's not my fault. I'm not even there for the away games. She playfully jabbed a finger into his chest, secretly loving how little resistance there was. The man was fit, and she wanted to touch him all over to see where those muscles ran and where they ended. So, how are you going to do it all? He asked. Do what? She took a sip of her beer. Don't you run a few businesses here in town? She shook her head, bending to pet Miles's dog, Bucky, as she came over for a scratch behind the ears. Not anymore. I gave them up. Working home games and now in the Dragons' offices as well, she didn't have time to keep up with them, so she'd sold them or closed them down. She'd started a lot of small businesses over the years, but the daily grind of building and maintaining them was so boring, they'd never really gone anywhere. It was one of the things she loved about her current job. She came up with ideas and set them in motion, and then someone else dealt with the details of it all. Maverick was looking at her like she was crazy. All of them? You're not even filling in at the watering hole? She shook her head. It was a little scary letting go of all those income streams after the way they had taken care of her over the years. Working for one company, one boss, was something she'd promised herself she'd never do again. Years ago, she'd had a great job in high school and at a high-end restaurant where the tips were amazing. But when she talked to her boss about he kept putting his hand on her butt, she suddenly found herself getting fewer and fewer shifts until she'd had to resign and find something new. Wow, that's a big deal. Maverick slid an arm across her shoulders, pulling her in for a brief, friendly embrace. Movement and a flash to her right caught her attention. Who's that with the camera? Gonna just take a little scene break here, have a sip of my tea. Today I am drinking a green tea with a hint of spearmint and lemongrass, and it's quite nice. If you like jasmine tea, you should give this one a try. It's by Tazo. Good for the throat too when you're reading out loud for a while. Oh yes, hello fishy. Alright. Maverick cast his gaze in the direction Daisy-Mae was looking. The photographer. He'd forgotten all about him as soon as he joined her at the fence. He'd been caught up in her dazzling smile, the easy jokes, and the fact that she'd seemingly reinvented herself in 3 short weeks. Gone were the cropped shirts and that certain something that screamed Texan country babe. She was still a babe, of course. and wearing her usual hat, boots, and fitted jeans. But something was different. Was it her top, hair, makeup? She had a sophisticated nuance now that put her in a whole new category of the sexiest woman on earth. He rubbed his forehead, trying to refocus his thoughts. Daisy-Mae was a massive distraction. She was also unattainable, and therefore perfectly fine to have a slight obsession over as long as they didn't spend much time together, so she didn't pull him away from what truly mattered, the game. But that didn't mean he couldn't still imagine having Daisy-Mae on his arm, taking her out to the nicest restaurants in the city and pampering her. He'd bet, despite her many pageant wins, that no man had ever treated her in the way that she truly deserved, not even his best friend, Miles Wilder, who cared deeply for her. The two had stayed together beyond their teenage years more out of habit than for love or deep compatibility. And for some reason, it was often Maverick reminding Miles that Daisy-Mae had a birthday coming up, or that Valentine's Day was just around the corner. And that shouldn't happen, especially to a woman as special and loyal as Daisy-Mae. The PR team has him shadowing me, Maverick said, finally clearing his thoughts enough to answer her earlier question. Why? They're hoping to catch some candid shots of me being a decent human being, I guess. He tried to play it off like his reputation didn't bother him, although he was sure she'd heard just how severely his crappy reputation was dragging down the team, and maybe even knew more about the team's plans to fix it than he did. He took a photo of us. Maverick nodded. He wanted to laugh and enjoy that sunshine smile of hers, not talk about this. When he'd shot down the fairy tale idea, he'd had to agree to something, so a trailing photographer it was. Why? Are you going to be an article or something? Her look grew wary as she sized up the photographer. Do you want me to go over there and crush his camera? A mischievous twinkle flashed in her blue eyes. Would you do that for me? Anything. Great. I could use another beer. She handed him her empty bottle. He hesitated, unsure whether he was being tested, teased, or if she simply just wanted a fresh drink. Sure. Same kind? He checked the label. Not a Wilder homemade brew made by the youngest brother, Ryan. Smart call. Yes, please. He moved away. Oh, and can you get me some of Maria's layered dip? Her request was innocent enough on the surface, but he knew getting his hands on Maria's dip at a party where her octogenarian father-in-law, Carmichael, was present was like trying to fill a water glass in the middle of the desert. Maverick scanned the people clustered around the congratulations, Karen and Miles sign. Banner. Sure enough, Carmichael was there, hunched over the layered dip, elbows out like he was ready to bite anyone who dared try to steal a scoop. Get some yourself, Maverick told her with a light scoff. So much for doing anything for me. She gave him a dramatic roll of her eyes. He snorted and headed to the beer trough near the patio's smoking barbecue. He bumped into Miles along the way, and they walked back to the fence together. Look who I found, Maverick said to Daisy-Mae. Lovely party, she told Miles. Her smile didn't emit her usual ray of sunshine, and Maverick figured it had to be pretty tough being here. She and Miles had sort of fizzled out over recent years, but she'd been like one of the family. Seeing her friend in the spot she must have assumed would be hers must hurt. Or maybe it was just awkward. Your beer, m'lady. He bowed and handed her the bottle. Where's my dip? She gestured like she was upset, playing it up. When are you two getting married? Miles asked, laughing. Maverick winced at Miles and his lack of sensitivity. Why Daisy-Mae, a smart, beautiful woman, ever went for this knucklehead was beyond Maverick. Sure, his friend was charming and caring, but he'd never been the right man for Daisy-Mae. Mav has cold feet, Daisy-Mae said, sliding her arm through his. That twinkle was back. Time to tease Miles. Thanks for the beer, honey. She rolled up onto her tiptoes in her cowboy boots, planting a kiss on Maverick's cheek and spreading warmth through his entire body. He grinned at Miles, ready for his friend's reaction, focusing on that rather than how good Daisy-Mae's soft lips had felt against his skin and how he loved being called honey. Well, it's about time, Miles said with something bordering on disgust. Sorry, what? Maverick said as Daisy-Mae's arm went slack. You two, you've been over here having your own private party all night, laughing and stuff. Daisy-Mae had fully pulled away now, and Maverick wished she'd come back, snuggle in again. We were joking around. And I'm saying y'all would make a good pair. Miles grinned, and Maverick wondered if he was serious or if he'd finally turned the tables on them and their teasing. Miles tipped his hat to them and headed to the patio to greet a new party arrival. That was weird, Daisy-Mae said. Maverick nodded. You know, he said, gesturing toward Miles, who'd found Karen and was giving her a kiss. Maybe it's just all of this disgusting happiness around us, but it almost makes me want to give it a whirl. Daisy-Mae gave a choked laugh of surprise. Really? Sure, it might be a good thing. Although something as consuming as marriage still felt impossible. Daisy-Mae often referred to him as the one-date wonder for a solid reason. It took him a while to trust, and he had a lot of bad first dates thanks to his reservations. Being mildly famous, you were never sure if a woman was interested in you or what you might be able to offer. Then there was the other problem of the intense busyness during the season. Not many women enjoyed coming second to his career. Marriage would be a good thing. How? You need a nice wifey to pack your suitcase for all of your away games? He shot her a dark look. No, the PR twins think marriage might help my reputation. There, let's see what she had to say about that. Daisy-Mae turned to study him. Would you? Get married? Yeah, for work and positive press. He shrugged, not looking at her. He'd spent the last few weeks considering the idea. There were some fatal flaws, though. First, who would he marry? Second, a marriage for show sounded like a terrible plan. Maybe, he admitted. Maybe? Maybe? A few people from the patio turned to look their way. It's that bad? She asked, her eyes round. Maverick shrugged again and jammed his free hand into his jeans pocket. Wow, she said softly. That sucks. Yeah, and it's not even your fault. I know. Maverick froze. Wait 1 second. He turned to look at her more fully. Sorry, say that again? Well, that thing in Lafayette was obviously not your fault. You'd never, Her cheeks went red. The urge to kiss her was even stronger than that time she'd had it out with some pageant protesters. He'd been taken with how her face had glowed with righteous indignation. That same glow was back right along with her fight. Man, it was sexy. Never what? He asked, holding his breath. He felt like she knew him, saw him, knew he'd only done something good and was paying the price repeatedly. You're not the type to mess up someone's marriage. She was watching him, and the party disappeared, the evening closing in around them. It was just them and this moment and the truth that so few could see, but that Daisy-Mae seemed to. I know you didn't love her, and her husband is, she shivered. Is what? He was desperate for her to intuitively understand the truth, the things he'd never spoken out loud, that she would just know because she knew him, knew what he was and what he was not capable of. Adwin's not a good man. I think you were just trying to help Rihanna somehow. The entire world seemed to lift from his shoulders, his chest, his mind. It was as though he could expand his ribs and inhale fully for the first time since he'd stepped in and stopped Adwin from hurting Rihanna. Daisy-Mae's cool hand rested on his, and he met her eyes, hit with the force of one thought. It should never have been Miles with Daisy-Mae. It should have been him. There's another scene. I'm just going to take a quick little sip of tea. All right, hope you're enjoying it. Let's dive in again. Daisy-Mae's crush was taking on a life of its own as she continued to hang out with Maverick. She'd always thought he was cute, but tonight, the way he was hanging out alone with her at Miles's party and laughing with her, getting honest and deep, it was messing with her mind. It felt good to be around him. Too good, because the man was seriously out of her league. Plus, it felt wrong to crush on one of her ex's best friends. There was so much potential for broken friendships and awkward moments. But Miles's offhand comment about her and Maverick had hurt, and she couldn't figure out why. Whatever it was bringing up old feelings of being inadequate. It was as though Miles had announced to Maverick right there in front of her, "Yeah, I don't need her anymore. She was my reserve girlfriend. I kept her on a string in case I couldn't find anyone else, but I'm good now, so you can have her." Obviously, her mind was an absolute mess because she was certain he hadn't intended that. It didn't help that she just witnessed Miles drop a kiss on Karen's waiting lips. She didn't feel jealous, though. It was more like a sinking, hollow feeling, as though she'd never have love, the real kind. Her dad did his best to avoid her mother. Her grandma and grandpa had separate bedrooms and had bickered all of their lives. Marriage ran in her family, but love didn't. Not that burning, all-consuming kind of love that she'd been sold on by the media, the love she wanted. But seriously, how long did a woman have to wait for true love? At this rate, she was going to be in dentures and leak-proof panties by the time Cupid got down to Daisy-Mae Ray on his list. She was still standing by the fence with Maverick, too chicken to join the party, as well as enjoying monopolizing his company. She'd feared he'd eventually wander off with his photographer to get some candid shots of him cuddling Miles's dog or something, and she'd be forced to mingle. And if she did, it was likely that at least one person would make a remark about her missing out with Miles. And didn't it hurt to be there? She watched the happy couple across the yard, laughing, smiling, kissing. Daisy-Mae shook her head. They'd be getting married in a few short months on Valentine's Day. I can't imagine it. Marriage? She tipped her head to the side, realizing she could imagine marriage. It was just the getting there part. I mean, maybe I can. It would be nice to have someone to come home to. Someone who lights up when he wakes up beside me each morning. I thought you had a dog. She laughed. Ella's a girl, so she doesn't count. Anything with 4 legs doesn't. How about someone who calls out to you when you come home? You want that? I think it would feel less lonely. Kind of like when you're a kid and your mom is happy to see you come home from school. Well, Ella has that covered. This time he laughed. I really need to look into getting a dog. Daisy-Mae quirked her head at this insight into Maverick. He was only 2. She supposed he didn't keep a girlfriend long enough to fill the void. You can tell your dog anything and they won't judge you for it. Sold! He exclaimed, raising his arm like he was at an auction. I'm away a lot, though. That could be a problem. They were silent for a moment. I need a human, Daisy-Mae said. Meals, road trips, someone to lean against while watching TV. That sounds pretty nice. It's hard to find someone you don't mind in your space. Was that why his new ranch outside of town had been declared unofficially a woman-free zone? His mom was there frequently by the sounds of things, but that was it. Miles had tried to explain that it was Maverick's sanctuary when Daisy-Mae and Karen protested on behalf of womankind that they'd wanted to tag along, when they'd wanted to tag along and see the place. Excuse me. Naturally, it had only made Daisy-Mae even more curious about what had gone on with Maverick and Rihanna, and before that, Janie. Silence stretched between them, pleasant and comfortable. The party was growing louder, and a burst of laughter echoed across the yard. You know, most people date a little longer than 16 months before getting married, Maverick pointed out, resting an elbow on the fence, looking at Daisy-Mae. No, they don't. Okay, true. But these two were as good as engaged after 4 months of dating. I can't imagine being engaged in 4 months from now. There are literally no contenders. None? You lie. I do not. You're smart, kind, generous, sassy, and fun. You have men lined up waiting for you to notice them. She snorted. Daisy-Mae, he said, his tone serious. You have a full NHL team roster waiting to date you. A roster full of flirts, you mean? She crossed her arms. Because not a soul has asked me out. Maverick looked away with a hint of guilt. Yeah, that's strange. Anyway, I need someone who loves me just the way I am. No changes required. It really shouldn't be difficult. People get married all the time. It's easy. Then why aren't you hitched to some power, babe? She retorted. I will if you will. With you? Maverick clinked his beer bottle against hers. You just called shotgun on me. Congratulations, there'll be a prenup on your desk by Monday morning. You do have a desk now, right? She pulled her beer away from his and gave him a scowl that was difficult to master thanks to the giant smile that kept slipping out. You think you're so funny. She took a swallow of her drink, trying to hide the way her face was burning at the thought of marrying Maverick. To have a man like him, all hers, mind blown. Why not? He asked, leaning closer in the growing twilight. I have money, looks. She simply raised her eyebrows. He laughed with a casual shrug. Miles gave us the all clear. For a second right there before he laughed again, she thought she detected a hint of seriousness. All right, let's dive into Maverick's point of view and see what he thinks of all this flirting. Here we go. Maverick was half serious about marrying Daisy-Mae. She was the kind of woman who might understand his insane schedule and not shy away from the occasional bit of fame and recognition that came with his career. Plus, he really enjoyed hanging out with her. Daisy-Mae's expression darkened, and she gestured subtly to something behind him. About 8 feet away was Henry Wilder, Miles's great uncle and the grumpiest and happiest man in the town's long history. And he was talking to Maverick's mom. At least he's not after us, Daisy-Mae said. But maybe we should save her somehow? He has a way of making you feel like the smallest, least significant, and stupidest person in the world. Henry still hasn't forgiven me for warping his great nephews. He likes to remind her of that. Oh, the hockey thing? Daisy-Mae frowned. Really? Miles and his brothers had gotten into hockey alongside Maverick as teens, hitching rides to the city to skate on the only ice for miles. Henry had felt they were shirking their responsibilities on the ranch and that Maverick was tempting the boys into believing in a dream that would never come true for them. It probably irked him most that Maverick had made it and not one of his kin. But had that short-lived passion for hockey caused the Wilder brothers any long-lasting damage? No. Had it been amazing for all of them? Yes. My Lafayette scandal hasn't exactly helped his opinion of me, especially now that I'm tainting the town with my presence. It's enough that my mom has to read about the lies, but having someone like Henry rail at her about it is just too much. Daisy-Mae was chewing on the inside of her cheek, a sure sign something was bothering her. You should rescue her. Maverick gave her elbow a squeeze. He moved a few steps away, but hesitated as Daisy-Mae's mother hustled over, all tight clothes and high heels despite the lawn party. Daisy-Mae! Daisy-Mae! I got the name of that surgeon I saw on the show last week. She waved a slip of paper, tipping every so often as one of her heels sunk into the dry, packed dirt. He's expensive, but he'll be worth it. What on earth was she up to now? She was in what Daisy-Mae had once called pageant mode, which was characterized by a slight crazed shine in her eyes. He'd seen a few moms like that in hockey over the years, but they were nothing compared to Mrs. Ray. Hello, ma'am, Maverick said as the woman approached. Daisy-Mae waved him away, clearly embarrassed. Go save your mom. Not a chance. He had to know what this was about. His mom could handle herself. So could Daisy-Mae, but he was infinitely more interested in what Mrs. Ray thought Daisy-Mae needed than what Henry might rant about. You look as lovely as ever, Maverick said to Mrs. Ray. Don't sweet-talk me, hun, she replied, brushing him off. It won't work. Daisy-Mae refused to take the piece of paper thrust at her. Mom, I told you no. Everything okay? Maverick asked. Henry's turning red, Daisy-Mae replied, not looking away from her mom. Indeed, Henry was in full rant. His poor mom's smile had hardened like concrete, her cheeks pink with anger. The man's gray and white hair waved in the breeze as he shook a finger, and Maverick had a feeling his mom was finally going to deliver a well-deserved verbal smackdown. He just hoped the man didn't have a heart attack and ruin her big moment. You're on TV now, Daisy-Mae's mom was saying. You need to freshen things up a bit. She reached out like she was going to pat the underside of Daisy-Mae's chin, but Daisy-Mae deflected her. Otherwise, how are you ever going to find a man? You're not getting any younger, you know. Mom, enough, Daisy-Mae warned. Remember when your waist was just itty-bitty? She grabbed Maverick's arm. Maverick, tell her. She looks pretty darn gorgeous to me, he said, dropping his voice low so it took on a hint of something that could be catalogued as longing. Mrs. Ray harumphed. Well, you've proven you're not discerning. Mom! I've been watching the TV. Now, Maverick, hon, be a good boy and tell her what kind of fancy man she'll be missing out on in this new job if she doesn't put the effort in. They're all no good men like me, Mrs. Ray. That set her back for approximately 3 seconds. But they're rich, and Daisy-Mae is in her 30s. She can't afford to be choosy. Mom! Find someone nice enough. Her mother adjusted Daisy-Mae's long hair. And accidentally forget to take your birth control, and then you'll be set for life. Daisy-Mae visibly cringed. That's called entrapment. Daisy-Mae had never seen her look so humiliated and embarrassed. Not even the time her dress snagged while going down some stairs in a pageant and she took a huge tumble that cost her the crown. He had raced up on stage, Miles hot on his heels. It was only when he'd scooped her up into his arms that he'd realized his error. She wasn't his girlfriend, and he just destroyed her chance at a crown-saving recovery. Henry Wilder, his mother's voice sounded out, catching his attention. You need to find some woman to love you and melt that nasty, judgmental heart of yours. I do not care what you think, and we are done talking. His mother marched off, Henry's mouth opening and closing as he hurried after her, finger wagging. She whirled, glaring at the old man. I won't say it again, Henry, so back off. She glared at him for a moment longer, then stalked away, shoulders back. Daisy-Mae's wide eyes met Maverick's, and she gave a huff of surprised laughter. Wow. Maverick nodded. Henry had just bought himself a one-way ticket into his mother's doghouse. Daisy-Mae's got to take whatever's offered, Mrs. Ray continued, as though the disruption hadn't occurred, or she'll be alone forever, and this new job will just be like all the others. It won't last, and she'll come home living with me, and I like to keep the remote all to myself when her daddy's out on the road. Beauty queens can't succeed in business. They've got to take the taken while the taken is good, and there might not be another opportunity like this. Daisy-Mae's just selective, Mrs. Ray, Maverick said, doing his best not to growl. She'll find a great man and settle down soon. That's just a nice way of saying nobody'll take her. I'd take her. He winked at Daisy-Mae, wishing she knew just how true that was. Especially now that Miles seemed to have waved the checkered flag, possibly removing the bro code clause that had kept him from asking her out. I hope you enjoyed Chapter 2. Stay tuned for Chapter 3 coming soon. And if you want to read ahead, you can get the Cupcake Cottage in ebook, paperback, large print, and audio everywhere you look for books. And I look forward to your comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to get notifications when the next chapter is ready. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.